All right, I am back for another episode of Zen and Call Signs, and I have a guest with me named Alan Steinfeld. He's an author,
Hmm.
multi-author. He's got the book Making Contact right there. Thank you, sir. And he's been doing what I'm doing right now for many years, and you can go back and find him on YouTube and probably all across the internet for decades. So thank you, sir, for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's great to just talk to someone so open like you and kind of willing to hear other realities. So,
Oh
yes.
yeah, absolutely. If you'd start off about just kind of maybe give us your bio, your background, to like where you
Sure.
are in present day.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this YouTube channel. Well, before it was YouTube, as I said before the show, it was a cable television, and it's called New Realities. That's what it's called on cable, and that's what it's called on YouTube. So people can go to youtube.com/new realities, and it's an investigation of what I want to know. There's some
Yeah,
brilliant people out there, scientists and artists and creators of all sorts that are pushing the envelope of knowledge. So I'm not interested in the old time religions and what everyone knows. And, I'm seeking out people who are innovators and new thinkers, people like Bruce Lipton, if you know his work.
right.
He's
Yes,
an evolutionary biologist. He says, no, Darwin was wrong. We do not evolve through chance mutation. There's
right.
intention, and we're part of a bigger field. People like Joe Dispenza talk about this. There's the quantum field that's speaking to us, and I've even talked to Aboriginal elders about this whole dream time experience. How
Yeah,
there's energy and there's a constant flow of thought form realities coming through our awareness, but we're not sensitive to that unless we tune in. And people like Russell Targ, who started the remote viewing program at Stanford Research Institute. Remote viewing is something I think is fascinating. How these local senses only see what's here, but we have non-local sensory awareness where we could see things and hear things that are not local to these senses, and that's like rearrange our whole notion of who we are as human beings and the nature of our cognitive reality. So I'm looked at those things. Nassim Harmein, who's another innovator in astronomy and physics and quantum physics and dark hole, black hole, matter, black, what do they call dark energy, dark matter.
yep.
So these are people not just against the mainstream, but they're evolving the mainstream. And that's why I call my program New Realities. So I got started with that. I don't know, maybe it was in college. I started to
Yeah.
read, I went into
What
college. Go ahead.
what
Ask
spurred
me.
your your thought into that our reality wasn't as simple as it was? Where did that
Uh,
start?
that's a really good question. I think I had out of body experiences when I was younger. My father was actually a searcher. He was a great businessman, but after he built a business, he started to investigate Zen practices and metaphysics, and that gave me the permission because here's my father. It's
Right.
like, oh,
Yeah.
well, this is the most interesting thing I found, and really that started me on the true
Hmm.
path. So I had that background, but I went to see this channel.
Yeah.
Channeling was big and was starting to become big in the 80s. Now you could find a channel on every street corner, but
Yeah.
in the 80s it was still a little weird. I mean, still a little weird, but
Yeah.
it was strange. And this woman channeled this 35,000-year old ascended warrior. And I thought, it's either one of three things. She's either a great actress, which, the words and the information were great Shakespearean dialogue, or she's crazy. She's probably just like schizophrenic. And we know some of those people who say there's some, or possibly, perhaps, I don't know, maybe not. This could be true. So
Yeah.
I went to this audience, and there was this. little bleach blonde housewife from Tacoma there on the stage, and then she changed into this. Her whole body changed. Her neck swelled up. Her eyes went from blue to big dilated pupils, and she'd march around the stage. I mean, it's a great act. But I got a chance to ask a question, and this being, whoever that was, said, "Entity, what say you this day in your time?" And I thought that was such a weird, and I had studied literature, and I thought that was very, eloquent and all that. But there was a shift in my consciousness at that moment, like, and maybe you'll have this being in Bali, where it was like goes from ordinary awareness to like this mystical overlays of other realities without ayahuasca, without anything. Things
Right.
just shifted. It was sort of like an ayahuasca, but in a way more definitive.
Yes.
So that was a shift in my reality for the first time. I went from like thinking things were just psychological, everyone's function, to the fact that there's like a parapsychological evidence. So that I said, okay, I'll this door opened for me, and if there's anything to this, I'm going to check it out. And if there's nothing there, it's probably very shallow and empty and, a couple of hoaxers and all that. So I started to read books. And you know what? Once that door opens, it sort of closes behind you and there's no turning back. And
Yeah.
the level is not superficial. It's deep, deep, deep. It's probably the deepest because it's the origin of all traditions, all religions, all
Right.
metaphysical studies. It's infinite, that aspect of reality. So that got me started. If that answers your
Gotcha.
question,
How old were you when that
that
experience?
happened. I think it was in, I don't know, late 20s. So
Okay.
that's just kind of evolved since then. It's been a search, So there
Yeah.
was like some answers there, and then I figured, okay, I'll keep searching and I'll interview people after I do all the workshops. I'll start to talk to these people. So I did like, hundreds of workshops about different things, metaphysics. I studied acupuncture, which has its own kind of spiritual component. If you look at the traditional Chinese, not the communist version of it, which was kind of a watered down, where they took all the spirituality out of that and
Right.
called it TCM, which means traditional Chinese medicine, but there's really nothing traditional about it. So to
Right.
really understand Chinese medicine, you have to go to the Taoist approach, which is some people call classical Chinese medicine, which I found an amazing teacher named Jeffrey Ewan who did teach that. He taught the real spiritual traditions behind the Taoist practices. But you won't get that in most acupuncture schools. So a lot of things I did just keep reinforcing this thing that
Yep.
there's this other reality. So that's how I
Yep.
sort of got started, right?
When you had that experience, when did it intersect the realities with I guess I don't know what comes to mind is like extraterrestrials or like where do
Yeah,
those
right.
intersect? Because I don't know where they would for me exactly.
That's a really good question. And that is a question that a lot of people, even investigating extraterrestrial UFOs, are asking. And there seems to be this paranormal element to the UFO phenomena. So it's not just visitors from outer space. That's the old because there's obviously something here. I mean,
Yeah.
there's things in our space and they're physical, but there's
Yes.
this paraphysical, paranormal aspect to it. So that's one of the reasons, and maybe you've heard it went from UFOs to UAPs,
Right.
unidentified anomalous phenomena. So the difference is unidentified flying objects to anomalous phenomena. So it's not just flying objects. Anomalous means something we don't quite understand. We can't put it
Right.
into a box, so we call it anomalous. And it went from object to phenomena. So what the government, and I think it actually started in the UK, realized these are not objects. The phenomena is having an effect on people. It's having a psychological, it's having a neurological, it's having a paranormal. I mean, people start to see balls of light. If you've interacted with this phenomena, strange coincidences happen. So there's this overlay of what now people are calling paranormal ghosts. People start to see
Right.
people who've crossed over. I mean, there's a whole range, and there's a shift in consciousness. There's missing time. There's out of body experience. There's somehow this other association with this very physical phenomena, because people see physical things. There's crash retrievals. The U.S. government has things in their possession, which has been just testified by insiders. If you listen to David Grush, I don't know if you've heard him. He's an from last year.
Yep.
So there's these physical things, and there's this other element. Like, one aspect is people who supposedly, and I haven't been one of them, see this craft, or maybe it's a craft that the U.S. government has. On the outside, it looks about 30 feet. But if you go inside these things, it's the size of a football field. That's just so
Yeah.
unexplainable. And that's really where we're at with the phenomena. It's we do not understand it. We don't understand this psychic. So your question was really great, because people think it's either one thing or the other, and what seems to be happening, it's not one thing or the other. The people I respect, the people I go to for answers to this, like Whitley Strieber, Jeffrey Kripal, Grant Cameron, some of these people are in my book, actually, because my book is a collection of essays. They acknowledge this strange. So people think, oh, yeah, we're just being visited by beings from outer space. And that might be true,
Yeah.
but the function of reality is also shifted in the presence of these beings. It's sort of like that experience I just described. It's like there's
Right.
this alternate reality that happens, even
Well,
if
I
you
guess it's
just
like,
see. Yeah, yeah. Even what?
oh, sorry.
No,
I
what were you
guess maybe
saying?
it's like in quantum physics in the sense of
Yeah,
when you observe it, that is its own reality, that
yeah.
it changes the state. So it's a superposition,
Right.
something like that.
No, that's really smart. That's good, because not only does it change the superposition, but Grant Cameron says that in my book, because he wrote a chapter. He says, if you've seen a UFO, you are entangled with it. There's
Right.
no innocent bystanders. It's like is a consciousness link. So I think that's what you're referring to, which is like quantum
Yeah.
physics. Yeah,
Yep, I have another one. So, are
yeah,
you familiar with the Tic Tac off the
yeah.
coast? You've
I
seen
am.
that. And I remember when I saw that for the first time, and I saw the videos and the images, and like I saw everything I could just be like, oh my God, what is that? And I'm sure you've seen Flight of the Navigator in the 80s.
Which one is
That's
that? The
the one where
fighter?
the kid gets on this, like, alien craft, and it looks like a teardrop. It's a
Oh,
perfectly silver teardrop basically, and it can go so fast. It's like kind of
it's a
like a gravity
movie.
mirror.
It's some
Yeah,
kind of.
Flight of the Navigator,
Oh,
sci-fi movie.
I'm gonna write that
But
down.
that's so I saw that, and so think of like a one-sided teardrop, and
Mm-hmm.
it basically folds, goes so fast, and I don't know, it's just fascinating. And when I saw the video of the Tic Tac, I was like, oh, that's a gravity mirroring craft, right?
Okay.
That has the ability to pull, because as the Commander Frazier talks about, it's flying over the water and then pulls like 50 G's to go like 20 miles in a second. And I saw that. I saw the FLIR footage because I'm a pilot and I have a FLIR, and
Yeah.
I did all those things over the water, and I operated in those areas for years. Like that's where I flew almost daily. And I'm like, you see that, and I was just so struck by irrefutable evidence.
Right.
And
Well.
I guess there's one question where I kind of was like, okay, that's either our tech or someone else's tech from a previous eon, like
Mm-hmm.
prior Younger Dryas type of,
Right. Right.
or it's alien craft. I don't know. So what's your thoughts
Well.
on that? I'd love to
Well,
get
the
your
other
your
thing
take.
about the TikTok I want to ask you is that Fravor
Yeah.
said that he was directed to go to his, what is it, contact point, or his, what
Yeah,
do they call? Is it
there's
pitch
basically a
point?
term to reorganize the whole fleet around a specific point, and he went to,
Right.
like, that's where the Tic Tac went because it knew.
Well,
You know what I mean?
he
Like,
was directed to go there, which probably would take a couple of minutes, and the Tic Tac was there, like
yeah,
it read the mind.
Oh,
And you see that. So if you listen to Fravor, and he's probably one of the top gun pilots, right? You have to be
right.
pretty.
Very
I
impressive.
think he knows what the latest technology, even these triangular stealth things that the U.S. is coming up with. He says there's nothing like this that we
Right.
have, or probably anyone else has. So where's it come from? Well, it could have been an ancient pre-Younger Dryas technology. This is a theory of Hal Puthoff. He calls them the ultra-terrestrials, like a terrestrial race
Right.
that
Yep.
just develop. And some people say there's a whole race of these beings inside the Earth, inside these huge caverns that are the size of
Yeah.
continents, and inside the Earth. There might be
Yeah.
entrances in Bali. I don't know, but or well, they're not ours. Okay, this is
Yeah.
why the term non-human intelligence is now being thrown around. Not aliens, but maybe they are superhuman. But what do I think? I don't want to. I'm not saying they're Pleiadian or all these things like that. That's
Right.
called woo in the UFO literature. If you say, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they're Pleiadian," I mean, maybe they are. But to make that kind of definitive statement, I just interviewed people like Diana Paselka. She's, people on the inside of this phenomenon. Well, she's pretty inside, even though she's a professor. But, we want to stay where the facts are. So I don't want to
Right.
say, oh, yeah, they're, Andromedans, and maybe they are, but to make those statements, we have to say what Chuck Schumer is saying. He's the head of the U.S. Senate, New York senator. He's putting together the UAP Disclosure Act inside the NDAA, which is National Defense Authorization Act. So that's like how much money Congress is giving the Pentagon. And inside that, there's something called the UAP Disclosure Act, UAPDA. And so he has an amendment for the NDAA where people have to come forward and talk about how much they know about non-human intelligence. So he names that. It was shot down last year, but it's now put back into this next year's proposal for congressional or Pentagon funding. And so he's naming it non-human intelligence. So I think there is non-human intelligence. So yes, there's craft out there, but Congress is yet to say, well, who's flying these things? There's obviously things out there. You've talked to pilots that who've seen things. And it's obviously, if we just use the tic tac, under some kind of intelligence operation. Those things may be drones that are being flown by beings outside of that. So I think that's probably the case. But we have to talk about who's the intelligence. And I don't know. And other people are saying, like Lou Elizondo, you know who he is?
I'm not familiar with that name, no.
Look him up. He's the guy who's first started the Lou Elizondo, Elizondo, or something.
Okay.
He just released yesterday a book called, or today actually, this is a great time to talk about it, the book called Eminent. It's like the U.S. government's hunt for UFOs, and he's an insider. He was an intelligence officer. He went to Afghanistan and
I recognize
wherever,
his name
Iraq,
now, or
maybe.
him. So yeah,
Lou
I've seen him
Lue,
before.
yeah. And so he's come out with this book because he's the one who led the charge. He was working for the government. He quit the government and said, "I want people to know this. The U.S. The American people have a right to know what secrets are being held by the government because, like, they're not giving away any weapons. There's no reason why we just can't know we're not alone in the universe. What does that threaten anybody or anything in the army? Well, you know who it does threaten. It threatens the fossil fuel companies that are really
Yeah.
invested because obviously, and you will know this, Blake, whatever they're driving, they're not filling up their gas tank to get
Right.
here, right? Don't they use
Yeah.
gas for these big jets? They do, right? The stuff you
Yeah.
fly. Well, they're not using that. This
Right.
is a whole other technology that will put those billion-trillion-dollar money makers out of
Yeah.
business. And of course,
Yep.
they're connected to the Pentagon and some congressional leaders that are voting down this bill. So that's number one. It's not so much about aliens. Who really cares about aliens? I mean, I do, but these people, it's
Yeah,
just
follow the money.
money. Yeah, it's follow the money, it's politics, it's control. Also, if we
Yeah,
are being visited by things that we have no defense capabilities, not that they're really even attacking us or anything, why do we have $1 billion defense budget? So there's that side of the
right.
money involved there too. So
Right,
I think
because
it's
I think
fascinating.
the
Yeah, yeah,
agreed, because
yeah,
there's like my thought when I saw the Tic Tac was like, hey, gravity mirror, right? And what's powering it? So it's got to be
yeah.
something, to be able to do that type of, that means that whatever it's got has unlimited power in some fashion or something like that. So
It,
it's like,
it
right, that puts all
does.
fossil fuels out of business, where it's like there's free energy. There's, you're
Yeah,
like, oh my gosh, we're talking about a post-scarcity society. And and the next question
yeah.
for you is like, how do we like raise the bar of that? I mean, I think you're doing it, but raise the bar of that conscious,
Right.
what do you think?
Well, first, that's a great question too. Good question. First, we have to realize that there's a cover up, that the government knows
Yeah.
more than it's
Oh
telling
yeah.
us, and the fact that if they could come forward and say, okay, they might not say we've been lying to you, but guess what? We have
Yeah.
bodies, we have craft, we're developing reverse engineering technology. If that could become public, and it is becoming public with guys like Lou Elizondo, David Grush, Gary Nolan, Hal Puthoff, Chris Mellon, these are insiders who are breaking rank with those that
Yeah.
have kept the secret. It's been a secret since Roswell. Roswell is real. If you read Lou Elizondo's book, the insiders know Roswell's real. They took the bodies that they found there
Yeah.
in Roswell or outside Roswell to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which became a hub of this deep secret UFO investigations. And the Air Force then proposed a debunking campaign against
Yeah.
people who would come out. They would ridicule them and
Yes.
talk about them being crazy. And that's still ongoing. There's still a
Yep.
part of the Pentagon that's saying, no, we have no evidence of anything extraterrestrial. But when the report came out in what was this, I think in 2021, it was the preliminary report for UAP investigation. They said, well, there's 144 things reported. We can identify one of those things as a balloon, and 143 of them were what we'll call other. So they put it in the category of a very uncreative other label. So they know that this is this is, I mean, yeah, it sounds science fiction because I'm totally into science fiction too. If you read my book, my whole chapter begins with my obsession with science fiction and how that led to my obsession with UFOs. But it sounds like
Yeah.
science
All right.
fiction. And you know what science fiction? Science fiction is someone writing, for 3 years, the world went into retreat and everyone was locked in their homes and there was this huge shutdown and, things drastically changed. That sounds like science fiction. But what
Yeah.
that did was lead to this other possibility that, well, if that could be true, that the world could be shut down, which is really a science fiction plot, right? Why can't these
Right.
other things be true? Why aren't those other things true? And they not only why can't they are true, and this is what this time in history, Danny Sheehan, if you know who he is, the people's lawyer, he defended Karen Silkwood, Standing Rock, the Pentagon Papers. He is the UFO lawyer, and he is on the side of getting this out there to the public. So that's one way to get what your question was, the baby boomer, modern American person just focused on their career. Say, what? Wait, there's really something going on. I have a friend who does a podcast called What? Wait? And it's all this investigations into all this kind of stuff, the stuff Kelly's so interested in, your wife, who's just
Yeah.
in a really amazing psychic. She really is. She has a gift, and and she's such a regular person too. And you just think, oh, there's this, regular mom and wife, but she's like this
Yeah.
amazing. So how do you explain that to the regular person that she can?
Right.
I mean, Like your friends,
I
right? I
agree.
mean, do you tell
Yeah.
your
And
friends like, "Oh, my wife does this"?
yeah, I mean, some of it's here it's pretty okay, but yeah, sometimes it's they're just kind of like, okay, cool. So the Mets, the baseball games, they
Exactly.
just immediate switch off because they can't.
Well,
It's almost like NPC mode. Are you familiar with that term?
NPC, no, what is that?
Um, this is like probably for my son who's 14, and it's in any games when he's playing, or it's a role playing game, and there'll be a character in the game, and they're called a non-player character. And you just walk up to them and you click on them, and they'll have like, do you want to trade with them, or do you want to ask them about the bar,
Mm.
like, and you just
Mm.
click, and that's their only two responses.
Right. Well, it is sort of like that, but it's very threatening to people's
Right. True.
worldview and sense of identity. If you've grown up with the world, and we have probably, but we read science fiction, so it was a little different because we. But if you
Yeah.
said the world is this way, we're all alone in the universe. Other life is impossible. There's no evidence. You listen to people
Right.
like Carl Sagan or Neil
Right.
deGrasse Tyson, who pick up the torch of this skepticism. And Neil deGrasse Tyson even says, "Oh, what Fravor said with his own eyes must be an artifact on his radar." He's missing the point because
Yeah.
there's no way, right? I mean, isn't that ridiculous? There's
No.
no way to put this bigger picture of reality into this
Right.
worldview, this
Right.
that we've constructed. And you know what? I'm writing about this in my next book. Our worldview is very caught up with our personal identity. So you can't tell
Exactly.
me that that's possible because then who I think I am and what I'm trying to create in my little world doesn't make sense. It's like,
Yeah.
so it's a
It
threat.
destroys their reality. Yeah.
It's cognitive dissonance. So a lot of times people see something in the sky, even like when I've seen things, it's like, is that really there? It
Yeah.
creates, because even me and you, I mean, we're pretty brought up mainstream American culture. We think so much is possible, and when something else, even what Kelly's doing, comes into your worldview, there's maybe, you've been with her a while, so you can fit it in somehow,
Yeah.
but these people you tell, like, oh yeah, what else is on the news, they don't have
Right.
a frame for it. And so what I'm
Exactly.
trying to do, that's why the book is called, you can see, Preparing
Yep.
for, is that backwards on your screen? It's backwards on my screen, but
No, I got it. It's good.
okay, because when I say preparing means let's tell people what's out there. That's the preparation. Okay, let's just say, let's not surprise people, because if you're prepared, when you see something in the sky, you could say, "Oh yeah, I read about this. It's not so weird, but it's still pretty weird." But
Right.
do you see? I think you're really getting what a threat. Government comes out and says, "Guess what? We're not alone in the universe. We have this reversed engineering, maybe this, 0 point energy, this free energy." It's like, what?
Right.
Wait, it's
Right.
it's a shock. It's a shock to the identity, and that's why people are talking about the slow leaking rollout of disclosure. It's a slow leak. So yeah, there's information being leaked, and there's another leak there, and it's now the faucet's not being turned on all the way because that would be too much to religious fanatics and people, even people in a very small world. So like
Right.
my mother, after I wrote my book, my mother says to me, "You don't really believe this stuff, do you?" And I say to her, "Not only do I believe it, I've made a career out of it." So
Yeah.
there you go. So that, I think
um,
that's what the problem we have facing on here. Yeah.
yeah. So another thought that comes to mind is that, because I grew up Anglican Catholic, and,
Mm-hmm.
my religious and philosophical beliefs have obviously evolved over time, but they're not mutually exclusive in the sense
Yeah.
is that, I still, when I think of the Bible and Christianity and Jesus is like, where my thought goes is to, he operated, I think he was a man, operated with Christ consciousness. Like, right,
Yeah.
maybe he was a medium, like, I don't know, but he
Mm-hmm.
certainly was a real man that, became a martyr and suffered. And, that's true. And so, like, that's all right. So,
Yeah.
how do I wrestle with that, with my Christianity with like I don't think it's exclusive with this bigger picture of the cosmos being an infinite and also interdimensional and everything,
Right.
you know.
Well, that's a really another really good, insightful question. And I think of Jesus, and I was brought up Jewish, but I've read a lot of what Jesus said, and I think he, like you're right, he was a man, but what I think happened to him, and it happened to others, not just Jesus, that he realized his divinity. So
Yep.
yes, maybe he was crucified, but he was able to bring the energy back into the body and what the Christians say resurrect, something. And if you look at the Shroud of Turin, which is
Right.
2,000 years old, it's the image of this man that's lit up on this, you know about the Shroud of Turin, right?
Yes.
Uh, so I think Jesus demonstrated the divinity that's possible in all beings, the infinite nature. So, yes, we're infinite beings that Jesus and Buddha and lots of other ascended masters have demonstrated. I mean, Jesus may be the most recent, but you do hear about people in India who just disappear, who
Right.
ascend, who in Tibetan tradition build the rainbow body. That's another
Right.
way of talking about the resurrection of the infinite nature. So we are capable of doing that. You, right there in that body, can turn that into light. There's a biophotonic potential in each cell. I mean, the ability to turn your body into light. We haven't activated it. We are not aware of it, but there are models like Jesus and other great leaders who have been able to activate what's in our potential to do. We're, looking at ourselves, our infinite nature. I mean, ascension is a sort of a pop term you hear in the kind of new age. But what is that really? It's doing what Jesus did, and or other masters have done, and we can do that. But you have to lead a different life. You have to, like, we're in the material world, but not of the material world. I mean, people like Kelly who can tap into this infinite realm because when she's talking to people who have crossed over, well, where are they, right?
Right.
What I'm just
Yeah.
going to close my window for a second. I'm getting outdoor sounds there. Anyway, did I show my underwear when I start? No.
Oh no.
Okay, good. So that's how you can reconcile like religion. I think it may hold some good moral structure. Like if you
Sure.
talk to someone and you say they're a good Christian, which is, I don't mean a fanatic, but they
Yeah.
hold the principles of like compassion and empathy. I mean, those things,
Right.
I would trust those more than someone like, not to be too political, but someone like Donald Trump who doesn't have any morals. You know, I hope
Sure.
that
Yeah.
doesn't lose you audience members, but there's people out. Yeah. No, so anyway,
Uh,
I don't think we need religion anymore when we understand like the infinite nature of who we are as human beings and realize there's a the moral code of empathy, do unto others, I do that. That's just in every religion. That's just
yeah.
basic
Yeah.
entanglement, quantum entanglement theory. If, that's me over there, if I can feel what you're feeling, then why would I want to do something
Right.
to make you or me feel bad? So that's innate, I think, in the human psyche, that understanding. But people are brought up in households that, don't have that empathy or are abused or all that. I mean, your kids have loving parents, so they're naturally probably decent people, at least your son, and I'm sure they are,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
brought them up with a nurturing that cultivates empathy and love and compassion. And if they didn't, if they had to survive on the street or they had to do all that, then, or they weren't loved, like Donald Trump, maybe he wasn't loved. And I don't think he was. So everything he does, he has to prove himself to be the best and the greatest because there's not that security that he can fall back on. I mean, I was loved. So I felt I had the security. I could go out and talk about things that people might not like or might not understand or might be totally against. And it's okay because I know I'm loved, and
Right.
so we can develop that compassion. So I think, I mean, people can belong to whatever religion they want, and that's great. But we have to, I think, transcend those old models and realize who we are as human beings innately transcends those force fed moral things, and who we really are really moral, compassionate beings. That's my
Yes.
feeling. Does that
Yeah.
answer your
What's
question?
I
Yeah.
yes. So
Okay.
I've got another one.
Yeah.
With that being said, what is your kind of philosophical operating system? Like, how do you govern yourself exactly?
Yeah, that's interesting. I like your questions because they're really unique, and
Well,
they
thanks.
makes me think. Okay, how do well, well, I when I saw this channel would say Ramtha was the name of the channel I saw when I was like 30, and that shifted my reality. He would say, "Look for the God in everyone."
Hmm.
That means
Yep.
look for, and you can see it. You can see it if you do this exercise with someone, maybe someone you don't know so well, and you're just looking at them, you're just staring at them, and you look, and they're staring at you, and you just ask them to do this. There's some moment where the personality just drops away, and there's a presence, and it's a presence when there's light coming out of their eyes. It's like for a moment there's a flash where there's nothing else there, and you just
Yes.
present with them. There's no you personality. This is who you are, Blake, and this is my history, and this is what. No, there's a moment where you drop away that person and you become the infinite thing. So if you can see the God as a practice in everyone, like on the subway station, inside,
Yes.
the waitress in the restaurant. I mean, what is that? So that's when I remember to do that. Sort of been my practice. Where can I see the infinite nature inside everyone? And a lot of people, it's hard because there's this huge thing they've wrapped around them as a defense because, like we said,
Right.
they haven't been loved. But the more that they can be encouraged to be themselves, the less they have to develop. I know in children they need to develop a strong ego, which they should, because they need to find their place in the world. And then, but after that's developed, then they can step away and say, okay, anything you put after I am a pilot, I am a this. Anything you put after the I am diminishes the I am, because the I am is the nature of the being that you are. I am that which I am is the thing that, the infinite aspect of ourselves call ourselves. So that's what I try to strive for. I'm not saying I always do it, but I
Sure.
get impatient. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Where's the God there? But all that, it's like, but I
Yes.
think if we just remember that, and one more thing, when I teach remote viewing, people are accessing this infinite nature, because how else can they know? Like, how else can Kelly know that there's someone in the room, or even your daughter? She told us a story on this show about your daughter. I mean, that's something that, if they see people, they're accessing that infinite nature and the awareness of that infinite nature. So we can just remember that we're that. I think that changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that because Kelly's mentioned that a lot to me of how she has such patience and compassion for everybody that she sees and
Yeah.
wherever they are. And I'm like, I've asked her, like, how do you like do that? And she's like,
Yeah.
well, Blake, I just see the Godhead in everybody. And I'm like,
Right.
all right, I'm going to try harder to do that.
Yeah, the Christ energy, Jesus,
Yes.
Yeshua, whatever you want, achieved that. He had 40 days in the desert to be tempted to go back into the personality, and being crucified, whatever happened, whatever the Romans did. It's kind of a karmic irony that the Romans now hold the seat after they kill this guy. They make it the holy center of their empire.
Yeah.
Rome. So um, that's karma for you. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Exactly. Kind of going into maybe I don't think you know
Mm,
this, but
mm,
a small part of why I've kind of done this show is, right now, veterans and first responders, somewhere between
mm,
20 and 40 commit
mm,
suicide every day. some
I've
fashion.
heard that. I've heard that. Yeah.
And it's an inordinately large number
Yeah.
compared to the rest of the population. And and I think you talking about consciousness, new realities, and even the conversation we just had, like, hey, what's your philosophical source root code, or what you're thinking is like, or my thought is that that can help somebody. With that
Mm,
being said, and speaking on that, like, do you have any thoughts for if somebody was listening and
mm,
questioning whether they
mm.
wanted to be here or not, that anything else aside from what you just said, which I love, of asking that ultimate philosophical
Right.
question.
Well, you can kill the body, but you're not killing the thought forms that inhabit the body. So it doesn't really help. I mean, I would
Hmm.
say,
Yeah.
because this is a mind virus, this thing about, so it doesn't, well, maybe some of that ends, but my feeling and understanding, and you should talk to Kelly about this, is that the things that drive people to commit suicide don't disappear from that psyche, because it's this consciousness field that, and I know whatever drives people to want to do that is awful things they've witnessed, and guilt and shame, and and I do think that there's ways of working through this. And I
Right.
really have compassion for these people, because of the service to their country, because they thought that was the right thing. And maybe it was that they are, and there should be help, and there should be programs. And, there are ayahuasca retreats and ways to get in touch with the trauma and whatever
Right.
people suffer. There are people who do get beyond that. And I know it's not easy and it's awful. Whatever makes people want to do that is torture, and they are being tortured. And there are ways, I think, to reach those people, because people have done it. People have been
Right.
able to get in touch, and somehow, there was this woman who was helping soldiers returning from war, making masks, and they made
Yeah.
masks of the trauma. It was a
I've
great
seen
TED
that.
talk.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so when you can name this thing, so it's not an
Mm.
internal thing, because it's a trauma, and I've studied trauma. Actually, in my next book, I write a lot about trauma as it responds to the UFO contact, because people are traumatized. Betty and
Right.
Barney Hill were a couple from the early 1960s that had this encounter, and they went to this doctor, Benjamin Simon, who worked with Army veterans from World War II. Back then, it wasn't called PTSD; it was called combat fatigue, or some,
Yeah.
and
Shell
he and
shock.
shell
Something like that.
shock, right? It was called shell shock, and he worked with these soldiers. But when he met Betty and Barney Hill, he said whatever happened to them, and this is shocking, was worse or as bad as anyone he ever saw in hard combat, the traumas
Wow.
that someone saw. So whatever happened, whatever traumatized Betty and Barney Hill, was as intense as being in hardcore combat. So that's the intensity of the trauma that people suffer. And most of the time it's just blacked out. They don't even, like, some of these soldiers remember what happened or vaguely remember part of it. But for a lot of abductees, contactees, it's so intense and so different than the reality they know, that it's just goes into the psyche and buried there. But the effects of it, people do become alcoholics, they become drug addicts, they become withdrawn from the world. But anyway, I'm just saying, I studied
Yeah.
partly, and I think I was traumatized by my own contact experience. But getting back to your question, which is in a way more important because it's immediate, that you can work through these psychological damage, and there are ways. Is EMDR, which is sort of eye movement thing. So I recommend that people are. And I had a friend actually who was very depressed. His wife had died, and I sort of blame myself. And he took me out to lunch, and he was kind of depressed, and he said, "Well, what do you think about suicide?" And I said, "Oh, you're not going to do that, because there's so much excitement, so much possibilities." and he did a couple of months later. He did commit suicide, and I felt like, oh, I just brushed that off. And he was asking me, and I didn't really take that in because you know I think it's the world is so exciting and so full of possibilities that I wasn't looking at it from his point of view. But now that you're
Yeah.
bringing it up, that I remember that moment, and he was a great guy, really funny, but he was stuck, and it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't even what combat soldiers go through. Well, it was a
Right.
whole different thing. It started from his mother, whatever, But so there are answers for that, and I
Yeah.
think we can get those people, those veterans, the best help we can, and really effort in that to really make sure that everyone has a social worker after they get out of the service. I mean, a social worker should be assigned to people in combat just because of this situation. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, though, is it? Right?
I think the VA is a failed system
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they keep touting different things, and yet
Yeah.
22 veterans commit suicide a day. So it's very,
That's
yeah,
well, you might like this book by Lou Elizondo. He's a veteran. Read it.
yeah.
It's called Imminent. Imment. Eminent.
I'm
And
looking
he
at his
talks.
sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you're looking at his what? You're saying his what?
His Wikipedia right now, and I've seen some of his videos and stuff he's put up before, so I just didn't recognize the name, but yes, I'm tracking him.
He's someone veteran. Worked at Guantanamo. Probably did things I don't know, but things he probably thought he had to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
And he has this whole cause now that he's involved with that is really about freedom and freeing people. Because if you can tell the truth, finally, I think it's a personal mission because in a way he did things for the government he probably wasn't happy about. And now he's not going against the government, but he's saying the government has been lying. He actually says the
yeah,
government has been lying to us. So are they lying to us about Vietnam, about what were
yeah,
we in Afghanistan? What was Iraq about? I mean, did we need?
right,
Yes, maybe Saddam wasn't a nice guy, but we put him in power. Did we need to go in and totally destabilize the Middle East
right,
to prove a
exactly.
point, which was
No,
pointless? So why are we doing this? Because the
yeah,
Pentagon's I'm sure there's some good thing, but their mission is to make war, feed the weapons industry, there's a
yeah,
lot of great things people can do if in service, like serving
yeah.
their country,
Well, I think
here.
it's defending, that's the idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to join. I wanted to defend my
Mm-hmm.
country. I wanted like that's exactly what I wanted to do. There's some other things in there, but I wanted to,
But who are we
just serve my
defending ourselves
country.
against? Who were,
Right.
the Russians were the enemy, or the Chinese, but they went bankrupt trying to compete with the US. So we outbuilt them, because we have a better system. I do think our system of capitalism works for some
Yep.
level. I mean, we need to combine it with, you know, compassion and all that.
Yeah.
But who are we defending? They were, I talked to Russian people. They were the ones with their heads under the desk in schoolhouses thinking the Americans were going to bomb them. So
Right.
this whole thing about really why, I mean, I'm like, I love the song Imagine, right? Imagine no countries, imagine no religion. It's like who we real, I mean, it was a whole propaganda event that was scheduled and still going on that people, yeah, were defending our country. Well, that was really true in World War II when we really had like awful situations where, definitely the Nazis needed to be stopped. And that was a war that we needed to defend. But then, what were we doing in Vietnam?
Right.
What was, I mean, now,
Well, I think the hindsight now for, yeah, for
yeah,
veterans is much
uh,
quicker. where we're,
Yeah.
and maybe even for me, where I'm like, I look back rather than, my grandfather looks back Vietnam and maybe he's questioning it 50,
Mm.
40 years later, where I'm like, I'm
Mhm.
questioning what I was doing 5 years ago and or less right
Where were
now.
you
And
5 years ago?
um,
I mean,
so I mean, so like I got out of the Marine Corps in 2000.
uh-huh.
And so what I guess my is the bigger point of like, what was I serving? Like, was I
Yeah.
defending my country? Was I doing what I thought I was doing, or was I just the tip of the spear for some other person's interests, not even my country's interests, to
Right.
as a proxy for something else? Maybe in Afghanistan, it's like to wash the money out of the tax bases out of the U.S. Like what? Well,
Right. So you see, the UFO phenomena completely upends this whole idea because we are defenseless, and this is something Lou
oh yeah,
Elizondo says as an inside, Pentagon. We are defenseless against this
right,
technology. So who
exactly,
are we and who are we defending ourselves against? And the other side of that is Danny Sheehan. I heard him. He's Lou Elizondo's lawyer. He said to Lou, well, are we being threatened by these things? And Elizondo had to talk to his people above him and say, we haven't really been threatened. We have the capability. They have the capability, of deactivating nuclear warheads. But there's been no out and out threat. So people say, should we
right.
fear this? Well, they've been here for 80 years that we know, and probably
Mm.
hundreds of years that we don't know, and they don't seem like they've actually taken over. We've really destroyed the world on our own. We've been invaded by our own negative thinking. I mean, and maybe those wars were manipulation, but we have more to fear from these other human beings than we do from anything that's out
Oh
there.
yeah,
So that's the real threat. So,
yeah,
but what you said about catching on to this is really, I think, another um, reason the isn't here, because it does threaten the threat narrative. That's the only thing that's
yes,
threatened, is the threat
yeah.
narrative. So
Um,
yeah.
you mentioned something about kind of nuclear weapons, and so
Yeah.
I'm pretty savvy on current events and
Mm.
with regard to like Ukraine, and let's say Taiwan, so two different areas.
Right.
And the other part is BRICS is the
Mm.
basically 100 plus nations in China, Russia, and a bunch of other countries
Mm.
coming together to kind of get off the petrodollar, and that's kind of like, hey,
Right.
we're getting off the hegemony of the U.S. dollar
Mm.
because
Mm.
it's failing, whatever.
Mm.
And and a lot of people in different circles are saying like, hey, this existential threat of World War III is coming real because we're more or less in Ukraine bombing, basically we're at like almost every stage of helping Ukrainians to bomb into Russia and whatever that offensive.
Mm.
So do you think we're like World War III, or do you think in nuclear war, or do you think that there's something else out there where they're like, hey, we're not going to let these monkeys destroy the
Right.
and we're going to
Well,
deactivate all the weapons? Like, is that a thing? What do you
well,
think?
obviously it's not a thing because there are bombs being dropped on lots of people, lots everywhere. So
Hmm.
I think, I was kind of like, I don't like Putin, but that interview that Tucker Carlson did,
Yep.
he does seem pretty intelligent, and he is saying the right things. Like, I think he said, why use nuclear weapons on our neighbor? I mean, that sort of nuclear scenario. He seemed to be aware of, I mean, maybe, but I think maybe we are being protected against that kind of nuclear thing because, of course, it didn't stop
Yep.
Hiroshima and all that. But according to some people who are on the inside of the whole UFO thing, nuclear explosions rip a hole in time space. This is what's happening at CERN. There's these portals that I just read are opening.
Yes.
So it's
Yep.
not only disrupts our total planetary, but it's like rips into these other dimensions. Supposedly, I don't really know any proof of that, but we've always been on the brink of World War III since World War II ended. The Cold War, there's
Yeah.
Russian arms and missile crisis. It's like if you ever read the history of the Peloponnesian Wars by Thucydides in ancient Greece,
Yes.
that
Yes.
Well, it was Sparta and Athens were playing out this, and they had all these colonies, and they were fighting each other through their proxy colonies, and it's like, well, I think who said? I think it was George Bernard Shaw says, "What we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history." So,
Yeah.
but think we have to change the vibrational field. So it's up to
Yeah.
us. I mean, yeah, maybe we'll be stopped from destroying ourselves by the who's ever out there, because I think they have an interest in our survival of it as a planet. But we've made a mess, humans to humans. We have to come to terms with the idea of countries and nationalities and patriotism and whatever that means. I mean, yes, it's great to have a country and to be for it, but if it means, Krishnamurti says a great thing. If you call yourself a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, that is a violent act because you have separated yourself from the rest of humanity. So calling ourselves this or that or this and or even like if you ever go to Cincinnati and you're against the Cincinnati
Yeah.
Reds, that people take that very seriously. Their
Yeah.
team, their sports team, their political party, their religion, that is their identity. And if you threaten their identity, and which
Right.
is what UFOs do, you're threatening who they think they are. And anyway, I think we have to really solve our own problems. There are like major situations. I think if we stop manufacturing around the world weapons, maybe they'll return to sticks and stones or whatever. But we have to change. Why do people, I mean, I know in the Middle East, if you take those Palestinians and those Israelis, you put them side by side without their unit, they're the same people.
Yes.
People's belief systems are what they're at war at. So the UFO, again, not to keep bringing it back to that, but that
Mm,
completely changes people's belief
right.
systems about who and what they are.
I feel like that type of disclosure at least kind of knock it off for a little bit. It would like reset
Yeah.
everything.
Yes.
Maybe hopefully like, hey, so it kind
Yeah.
of blew a bunch of different religions out of the water, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
if they're UFOs, I don't even know. There's like, well, it's
Yeah.
unexplainable. They're the devil then. No, I don't know. Come on.
Well, there are
Yeah.
people inside government saying that, and that's one of the reasons it hasn't been disclosed, because like
Yeah.
you're playing. So we have to get rid of all dogmas. I mean, my
Yes.
belief,
Yeah.
whatever dogma of religion, whatever dogma of political parties, it's not us against them. It's not we're going to fight, those words, we're fighting them. It's like, let's change the language. If you're fighting another political party, you're not making peace with the rest of the world. So we have to change our language, change our understanding, change the sense. And this is where Kelly's work is so important. Change like who we think we are as very limited people, limited to this very small identity. I think when people have readings with Kelly, they start maybe to glimpse the bigger possibilities, and then they go beyond their defined limited view of themselves. Because if
Yes.
those beings are still existing beyond the body, well then who are we? And I think
Right.
that's where we have to sort of meet the non-human intelligence on that playing field, because it's the field of consciousness. So yeah, maybe they look
Right.
like different than us, maybe they're smarter than us, greater technology, but on the bigger picture, this is just my feeling, I don't think they're higher or better than who we are on that essential level.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel similarly in that way of
Yeah.
it's not that simple. It's complex,
Yeah.
but
It is.
yeah, it's like it's something in that realm, and I'm like if the vibration, whatever is it. Nikola Tesla
Mm,
said something like, the I'm paraphrasing, but the secret to the universe or whatever is frequency, vibration, resonance, something like
exactly.
that. And I feel like I remember reading that a long time ago, and then obviously between Kelly and then Kelly, it's like, how is Kelly everything she's saying kind of coming into my sci-fi stuff and quantum and physics and quantum
Exactly.
mechanics, and I'm
It's
like,
very
all right,
sci-fi what
yeah,
Kelly's saying because it's real and sci-fi is
yeah,
real and
yeah,
that's UFOs are so sci-fi when I say how
yeah,
could this be possible? Well, even the New York Times article in 2017 that broke the news that there was a secret government program, the unidentified threat identification, whatever it was, said what was once science fiction is now science fact. You know, it says
right,
this in the New York Times. So
yeah,
anyway, but we should finish up soon because I do have to. But
yes.
I want to do. I want to keep talking to you, but we can continue another time. But
Well,
yeah,
what's your timeline like for today?
well, I just have like another really like 10 minutes or something or something.
Okay, all right,
I
perfect.
have
We can
something.
wrap up, but I'd love to actually maybe if we can wrap up, and if we could chat about your
Sure.
book that you got coming up.
Well, like I said, it's a deeper investigation. This is a preparation. This is telling
Okay,
people, like Lou Alessandro's telling people, with
yeah,
a bunch of experts. I have all these people who've written chapters in this book. So this
okay,
book is a survey from people I really respect in the field because once I had my encounter, and you can read that in the book, I started to become obsessed. Like, wow, how is this possible? I'm going to go to every workshop, every lecture, get every book. I mean, my bookshelves, I have probably, 400 UFO books, and there's
yeah,
probably thousands of them. So mine is just another one in that pile. But I wanted to make it a compilation to give people an overview of the phenomena, like because like just you said, and you're so right, it is so complex. It's not just, and if it was just like, and Jacques Vallée says it all the time, he's one of the all-time investigators. Have you heard of the name Jacques Vallée?
I don't know.
Jacques Vallée was the guy. Steven Spielberg had someone portray him in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They
Okay,
played this sort of French investigator. So everyone has their own point of view, and they all kind of do coincide. But it's such a complex phenomenon that
yeah,
in my next book, I'm talking about the witnesses, the contactees, how they experience trauma, but also like on the other side of that, people have had amazing healings. There's a guy named Chris Bledsoe who's seeing these angelic forms along with these UFOs and this
yeah.
divine feminine. Have you heard of Chris Bledsoe? He wrote a
But
book called
I kind of sounds
UFOs
familiar.
of
I mean,
God. Anyway,
okay,
great guy. I just met him, very spiritual, and he's seeing UFOs. He's seeing, so I want to get into the complexity of this thing. What's going on? And what I'm finding out is that, the deeper you read, all people don't know what's going on. People don't know. Like the
right,
experts don't know. Like Elizondo would say, oh, there's something here, but we don't know what it is. And so, what is this? How can we define it in concrete, spiritual, metaphysical term? How can we put that into a terminology? And then, how do we develop a relationship with this unknown phenomena that's not traumatizing? That
okay,
we can make peace with this because I don't think they're here to traumatize us. They're here to wake us up. This is something Whitley Strieber says, who's one of my favorite like experts in the field, and that one of the most well visited contactees. He wrote a book called Communion. So Whitley says, and he heard this from a general who was in. It's a new world if we can take it. We have to raise ourselves up to the occasion to meet these beings on the level that they exist. So we have to get over the fear, get over the trauma if we can, and meet them on an even playing field. So I'm trying to raise the bar
right,
that way. It's like they are more evolved, obviously have this technology, have this consciousness where they could shift time and space and do all these things that we could probably do if we knew how to do it. But they're trying to this is my like hopeful scenario. Some people say it's a threat. I say they're trying to raise us up to their level. Like if you have a dog, you're not barking at your dog when you're talking to them. You're talking to them on the level of a little more evolved.
right,
So they're communicating with us on a telepathic, consciousness, intuitive,
right,
psychic level, which is really what we're capable of, but we were never taught that. And then you get people like Kelly who somehow have developed that on their own, or other people like her, and they have this higher facility, which is a facility we all have, where, if she wanted to talk to aliens, I bet she could, but we can do
Yeah.
that too. And we need to re-educate ourselves, so when we meet the other, we don't go into fear and trauma and panic, but we meet them because the infinite nature of them is equal to the infinite nature of us, and we
Yeah.
somehow can make peace with that. That's like what I'm really trying to get down to, and incorporate all these new revelations and all that. So that's
Beautiful.
my focus. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
thank you for your
Thank
time,
you.
sir. This was a
Well,
pleasure. I could keep going, and I,
yeah,
if you could,
let's
but
do it again, because
okay.
when your questions make me think about things and create relationships in my mind that I haven't, and put pieces together. So someone like you questioning it from sort of outside, like, really makes me
Yeah.
rearrange my thoughts in a way that makes me see things, that put together pictures that
Oh,
and dots that I haven't connected before. So yeah,
well,
thanks.
there's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. I mean,
Mm.
Kelly never steers me wrong typically, so and she
I know
spoke very
she.
highly of you. So thank
Oh,
you so
that's
much
good.
for your time.
Well, we
Um,
met and we
yeah,
had a great moment. We met there
yeah.
in San
Here,
Diego.
I'll go ahead.